Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. This is a special Patreon edition of Let's Argue, where I hop into our fantastic Patreon page, tell your friends, tell your mom, get everyone to sign up. We take your suggestions, your hot takes, your unpopular opinions, your tough questions right off the page, and we respond to them in these videos, so let's go. Kidz Bop writers are lyrical geniuses. I'm not sure if I would go as far as to call them geniuses, but I won't deny that the job of Kidz Bop lyric writers is hard. Gotta take out the dirty words, gotta remove all weird implications or references to adult content, and sometimes you gotta change lyrics to just kind of be about the Kidz Bop brand. Stay on brand, keep the energy high, keep the positive vibes flowing. To do that job, you've gotta be a master of the English word. So again, I do not envy them. They have a hard job on their hands. You would like Dance Gavin Dance if they had different vocalists. Yeah, most likely, but I feel like there are a lot of different things that Dance Gavin Dance would have to change in order for me to like their music. However, I don't want to put this energy or this vibe out there that Dance Gavin Dance needs to change for me to like them, that's something they have to do at some point in their career. I mean, they seem like a relatively successful band doing what they're doing. It looks like they have some very passionate fans that at this point I assume they know how to please. They don't have to please me. Sure, I have my negative opinions about some of their albums. I did think that their latest full-length LP, or at least the follow-up to their record that I tore apart, I thought that was a marked improvement. Speaking from experience, nut allergy is the most embarrassing allergy there is. And I imagine it's so hard to just eat things without having to worry about whether or not there's a nut in it or something, or some kind of nut-based something, because nuts are in a lot of stuff. And there are quite a few nuts out there. Peanuts and almonds and walnuts and pecans, and some people are allergic to all of them. Some people are allergic to some of them. I imagine it's hard. And yeah, maybe embarrassing, but hey, you know what? As long as you're careful and you've got other good things going on for you in your life, you just keep plugging on. You can power through. I believe in you. Is there any exact reason why some production/mixing techniques from the Beatles aren't used much anymore? Are they just outdated? For example, in You Never Give Me Your Money, after the intro, they just put drums and vocals panned to the right and just piano and bass panned to the left. Yeah, there are other production bits like this throughout their discography, on Abbey Road, on Revolver, on White Album, and there are other groups as well in the past who would just hard pan certain instruments or bits of instrumentation. I think that that's not as emphasized now, because I think trend-wise, a lot of mixing emphasizes more centering everything that's bassy or percussive. Anything that might be more melodic or trebly or on the higher end of the frequency spectrum might be panned far to the left or far to the right, but not so far that you're not hearing it in the other channel as well. I think trends in modern mixing does tend to favor just balancing everything as much as possible without creating too much chaos. I think there are two major factors in modern music that have influenced this trend. One, loudness and volume, because it's easier to give the listener a fullness sensation when you have all of the instruments blaring at once in every speaker. It's harder to get that same compressed, blocked out feeling when you have some instruments turning up in the left, some instruments turning up in the right. And one more trend that I think has greatly influenced this is that a majority of music listeners today are listening to music on laptop speakers, on computer speakers, on earbuds. Not expensive headphones, not a big hi-fi system, so your average listener is not really going to be spending any time appreciating the differences in the left channel and the right channel when they are listening to their favorite song or their favorite artist anyway. It's sad to see some of these old production trends fall to the wayside, especially since I think they could be used pretty creatively in modern hip-hop, especially on the more abstract side. And I'm sure they are to some degree on some songs with some artists out there, but yeah, You hate rap with street content. I don't know where exactly you'd be getting this idea. I mean, sure, there are most likely some records that I've reviewed over the years that have some street content in the lyrics that I may have reviewed negatively or in a lukewarm fashion. But when I think about the most negatively reviewed hip-hop records that I've caught the most flack for over the years, and even some of the more middling ones that I've caught the most flack for, records like, I don't know, Views, Camp, Goblin, Logic's latest couple of records, The Big Day, I could go on. Some of the most negative hip-hop reviews I have ever put out center around albums that have little to no street content in them at all. Meanwhile, one of my favorite rap records of this year, Freddie Gibbs and Madlib, Bandana, has tons of street content on it. Gunna shouldn't have been on the XXL cover if he wasn't gonna participate at all. At least Tierra and Blueface did ciphers. I agree, I agree, I agree, agree, I agree, I agree, I agree, agree, I agree, I agree, I agree, agree, I agree, I agree, agree. Honestly though, can we be surprised? I said this when I initially did my reaction to that XXL cover, that Gunna was most likely going to have the worst freestyle and the worst cypher performance because he's not a good vocalist, he's not a good lyricist, he's not much of a good anything. He's a subpar, maybe passable over the right instrumental mumbler, and that's it. And not that that type of hip-hop doesn't have its interesting aesthetics and its artistry to it. It most certainly does. But just because you exist in that lane does not mean you can't be a good performer, doesn't mean you can't come through and kill it in your own way in these ciphers, in these freestyles, and Gunna just doesn't have that ability. He's not built like that. He has no business being on the cover, as you said, not only for not participating in this stuff, but not having the ability to, even if he wanted. And I still to this day am perplexed as to why anybody even likes listening to the guy, because his music is just so painfully generic, flavorless, has nothing interesting about it whatsoever. If you like trap music that's really vibey and psychedelic, it doesn't hit you with too much in the way of lyrical content, there are a lot of artists out there that are way more interesting than Gunna. Acapella music is boring. I don't care how impressive it is, especially when groups like the Pentatonics spit out bullshit for their fan base. Maybe if Bobby McFerrin came out with some good jams, then maybe I'd be a little more light on the subject, but from what I've heard, I can't find anything worthwhile. Rhythmic percussion is frankly more interesting and way more fun. Okay, here's my opinion. Acapella music is good or has the potential to be good or great, but unfortunately a great deal of it, or at least most of what in popular music gains the most attention, just ends up being really gimmicky stuff or covers or remixes and that sort of thing. And while I don't think percussion is necessary for a good song, and I don't think that you necessarily need much of anything other than maybe a couple of vocalists for a good song. You can put together a compelling piece with just a handful of vocalists. Still, I'm not hearing a lot of compelling original compositions that are just a cappella, and maybe that has to do with me not exploring the genre enough, possibly, but I don't know. I think that there definitely needs to be some risks taken to push the idea of the voice forward. The naked voice does not get enough respect in modern music, especially with all the auto-tune and modulation and effects and touch-ups. We need more nude voices. Quentin Tarantino's soundtracks on his early movies have aged better than the films themselves due to the political incorrectness of them. I don't know, man. I think a lot of those Tarantino films are still pretty badass. Maybe that's kind of a normie opinion of me, and maybe that's because I grew up on a lot of them, but I think there are a lot of things that can age badly about a film or age badly about a piece of art that no longer makes it appealing. I'm not sure if political correctness is necessarily one of those things for me personally. Sure, things can certainly make you cringe, but what is or is not politically correct in a certain era or a certain generation is very, very, very contextual, and that is always going to be changing. There are most likely things we're doing right now that 10 or 20 years down the road will then be seen as politically incorrect. And sure, during that time it may most likely be the right move to take those cultural changes in stride and just kind of roll with what's going on. But that does not mean that we should just throw away or denounce art of the past because there are problematic elements to it, because all art is contextual. No art work occurs or happens within a vacuum. And when it comes to writing off a piece of art because of its offensive content, I think that I favor more the approach of analyzing what the intent behind the messaging of that art was, as opposed to just cherry picking an idea or a scene or something out of it that has become deemed problematic over time. In my view, there are a lot of great pieces of art that could be written off through that very non-contextual process that we'd be doing ourselves a disservice by following. Bad production often ruins black metal instead of adding to it. Look, there are a lot of very early black metal records that I think are incredible. With that nasty, lo-fi, very harsh type of production, it was a unique moment for underground metal music. But I think we're at a point where a lot of the newer bands really have to progress past that and understand that with new technology, you're going to get new sounds and new aesthetics. And just trying to recapture the past does not make any sense, as pure as some people want the genre to be. Maybe this person is referring to a lot of those classic black metal records, and if you are, I beg you, try them again and try to listen past a lot of that noisiness and distortion and appreciate it for the very harsh, blizzard-like conditions that it creates in your mind's eye. If In League with Dragons hadn't been falsely marketed as being thematically centered around imagery from fantasy and tabletop RPGs, it would have been better received and a lot less of a disappointment. Maybe among general Mountain Goats fans, yes, because Mountain Goats fans do love a story, they do love a concept, but even if you totally ignore the tabletop gaming marketing angle of the album, even without that context, and I only really found out about that context just a little bit before I embarked on my review, I was not really all that impressed with the teaser tracks to the album when I got into the record without really, again, knowing much about that context or not really having had the time to anticipate what was going to happen on the record. I was still pretty disappointed with the production, found the songs really bland, just easily one of John's weakest records yet, but I don't know. All I can do is sit here and hope that that means that the next album, we can only go up from here. Winger is not as bad as people think they are, especially if ignore all their power ballads. Look, power ballads were kind of an essential part of a lot of those hard rock and hair metal bands of the 80s. Winger was not really anywhere near one of the best of them in my view. But if you need to ignore a whole section of a certain band's or a certain artist's discography, I don't know, I think you're doing yourself a disservice in trying to defend them past that point. But look, what I will say here is that I agree with what you're saying to the extent that does Winger deserve more hate or vitriol than, I don't know, Rat or Quiet Riot or any number of bands that were just total flops from that era? No, I don't think so. Possibly tough question. Why did you give The Big Day a strong 0 instead of just a 0, considering that you gave Speeding Bullet to Heaven just a 0, and with 0 being the end of your scale, it makes sense that you wouldn't have any qualifiers. Same applies for the 10s, which haven't gotten a light, decent, or a strong either. Well, here's the thing. A 10 is a number that you can't go past. I would say the strong, light, decent qualifiers serve almost as like a decimal. A 6.1 would be a light 6, a 6.5 would be a decent 6, a 6.9 would be a strong 6. 10 is literally the very end of the scale. You can't go past 10. You can't start scoring albums 10.5, 10.8, 10.9, or literally 10 is not the end of the scale. However, you can score an album a 0.1, a 0.5, a 0.9. So you can have a strong 0. Crash Team Racing is superior to Mario Kart. Yeah, but Diddy Kong Racing is better than all of them because in Diddy Kong Racing, you get frickin' planes. Do you get planes in the other ones? You get planes in Diddy Kong Racing. They brought planes to the table early on. Bam, planes. Les Claypool is better outside of Primus. The Len Claypool Delirium and Colonel Claypool's Bucket of Bernie Brains are amazing super jam bands, whereas Primus only really stuck around because of MTV and a few other bangers. No to this. No. As much as I think Primus's most recent material is disappointing, and there are some interesting things coming out of the Lennon Claypool Delirium, the first 3 or 4 Primus records are better than anything Les Claypool has done solo outside of Primus, and that's just facts. And you say, where would Primus be if not for MTV? Where would anything Les Claypool does outside of Primus be if not for Primus? No matter your opinion on it, you have to put My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy on the top albums of the decade's list to be considered a respectable critic. At this point, I am not considered a respectable critic. I'm really not. Like, nobody in the industry respects me, or very few people in the industry respect me. So honestly, the opportunity for me to become a respectable critic or be a respectable critic, it's pretty much past at this point. And putting Twisted Fantasy on my decades list is not going to get me there. Honestly, it's not going to get me there. It's not going to get me there. It's not really going to hurt my chances either because I'm not there. So what are you going to do? All of that being said, though, there are some records that have come out this past decade that I haven't been super crazy about, or as crazy about as some other albums. And they are certainly cultural touchstones and are worth mentioning. And I will have to most definitely do a video of either honorable mentions or work those mentions into this year-end list that I'm doing in some way, shape, or form. And that will definitely be one of those albums, I think. There will be other records as well that I think are as big or as relevant that need to get a nod, that I will be giving a nod to. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll get there. And that is going to be it for this edition of Let's Argue. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you for patronizing our Patreon. And you're the best. Love you. Forever.